Guten Abend, good evening. I am German. I moved to San Francisco about 23 years ago, and the last 10 years I've also spent a lot of time in Asia. And because it's 5 p.m., are there any dinosaurs here in the room? I think we heard that word a few times today. Any dinosaurs? Any corporates here in the room? Nobody? You can leave, it's 5 p.m. Right, you're on a different time zone, right? So, well, the corporates are all gone. That means we can really open up here. I've been following the last couple of sessions here, and why do we actually conduct this survey? And I'm not only going to talk about the survey. I will also share where are opportunities for European corporations with startups in Asia, and the other way around for European startups who want to go and work with corporates in Asia. And we'll make this actually interactive and collaborative, and I may just come out and pick you and hand the mic over to you, so don't be shy. But how did all this happen? First and foremost, my firm, Yushan Ventures, we are based in San Francisco, in Greater China, Taipei, Shanghai, and a very small presence in Berlin, growing. We invest in seed stage startups and also in Series A through a fund in Taipei. We have a business unit for technology scouting where we work with these multinationals, and that's why we have a lot of experience that I'd like to share with you, and that got us to do the study. And then last but not least, we opened the venture lab in Taipei for the automotive industry with a large German OEM. But so how do we get to the study? There was a project in Taiwan, and I can't mention the corporate, that we were called in. It was almost a 9-month project. It got kicked off. It's a corporation with 100,000 employees, very, very big, a lot of them in the manufacturing space. And the CEO was there, so we had the buy-in from all the business units. And to make it short, they actually wanted technology scouting, but they gutted an entire floor. They hired a chief innovation officer, and it looked like Facebook. And I was like, wow, you guys are actually really lucky. But it was only one floor. And a year later, the entire innovation team got fired, and the floor was actually gutted again and rebuilt to its original state. And that was a really shocking experience. I mean, that's like going from one extreme back to the other. And so we got together with APEC, and Audi sponsored the study and also supported us with access to corporates. And we interviewed 20 people for 1 hour, 20 executives, not only in automotive, in different industries, and 450 people responded to a 20-minute survey. We're not a survey company, so it was quite challenging, but we had an expert who was cross-tabulating the results to get these. I actually personally overestimated to get 450 people to take a 20-minute survey. It took a lot. So the results, and let's switch to the next slide. There's a clicker here. The results are actually pretty much summarized on this slide at the highest level. And of course, you want to hear about the barriers, and we know those barriers. The not invented here syndrome. It's by far the most problem in corporate innovation and dealing with corporates and startups. It's simply that the employees are scared, the R&D people in many cases are worried about their jobs, they're proud, or it's too much extra work to deal with a startup. That's a significant problem that we have seen in our interviews, in our work, and also in the survey results. And then we call the second one the HR trap. Many times the corporates just promote somebody from within who works 9 to 5, for instance. The corporate innovation people I've seen here this week, a lot of them are very, very youthful and have startup backgrounds, and I think it's getting better. But the HR trap is that the HR departments, when they have a job rec to hire an innovation manager, that's not really what they're trained to do. They don't really know what to look for in that person. Like startup experience, for instance, would be tremendously helpful. And then there is many times a lack of resources, right? And unfortunately for you startup guys here in the room, the innovation people in many cases are actually created by the corporations, because the corporations don't necessarily want to deal with the startups, but they have to, because shareholders will demand corporate innovation. I know one Japanese company in Silicon Valley that has an automotive incubator, and I know somebody who works in there. She's only allowed to even take her husband in the front lobby because behind the scenes is not much going on. That is not the case for all the innovation centers in Silicon Valley. There are about 60 or so of them, but that is a problem that shareholders, again, and CEOs must innovate and must work with startups. But the people in the business units don't always want to. So best practices. You should figure out a use case and approach a company, sometimes to the innovation people, if they have the right buy-in. Because the innovation people can't really do a whole lot with you unless they get buy-in from the business units, from the R&D departments, as an example, or from the marketing department, to actually allocate resources, which are human resources and budgets. And a lot of times there are cross departments that are involved, and it makes it even more complicated. So have a use case that you know the corporation needs to solve, and you can solve it and you can add value to it. And that gets us right to co-creation, work together as a team, and don't put all your eggs in a basket. One of our portfolio companies was in M&A talks with a very large Korean company, and 9 months later, the night before the M&A deal, the night before, the CEO of that company, the CEO of that Korean company actually killed the deal. That almost killed the startup in our portfolio, which has about 100 employees. So, be aware to put all your eggs in one basket. When you work with large corporations, because they can flip people easily. Jobs change. A startup that, like I remember one that actually was betting on tungsten. It was Samsung a few years ago in Silicon Valley, an Italian startup, and all the competitors were more open, but Samsung actually suggested that they put a lot of resources behind tungsten, and Samsung changed its strategy, and tungsten wasn't all of a sudden so important anymore. Well, the startup ended up failing. So it can be problematic. Local for local, of course, that's more from the manufacturing world. But when you as a startup go overseas and launch a unit in Asia or in other countries, hire local people. Don't send Germans to China to run your business. It ain't gonna work. And that's actually the same for German companies, for large corporates who want to work with Asian startups. Have a local employee that connects on a local level and doesn't come in like, yeah, we're the Germans, we're great about everything and innovation and so on. Things are different in Asia, especially on a local level. So have local employees that work for your corporation, have local employees, co-founders or senior people in a startup that can represent you locally. Okay, so next slide. Well, this is actually the high level. I didn't want to throw like 100 charts at you at 5 p.m. So let's just wrap up the survey and look at the opportunities. Is the next Apple growing in Asia? Who thinks so? Raise your hand. Is the next Apple growing in Asia? Not the company, but the next big opportunity. Wow, we all agree, right? That's why we're here at the Startup Conference. I think my travels, and I travel literally nonstop globally on 3 continents, and I meet a lot of startups, I meet a lot of corporates, and here in Germany, in the Hinterland, I attended the Hinterland conference where I'm from Bielefeld. When I mentioned the word Asia to startups, that was just like something really exotic. So Berlin is, I think, getting there, but the opportunity, as we know in this room, is huge. But for European or for German startups, it's challenging. And also for Mittelstand corporates, more and more of them are setting up incubation programs in China now or in Southeast Asia. They're tapping into it. So where are the opportunities, both for corporates and for startups, and what are the opportunities? And I want to make this a little interactive here, actually. And of course, there are opportunities in every vertical. But healthcare, if you look at China, the population of 1-something billion is decreasing. Of course, healthcare solutions are needed. And Germany has a phenomenal healthcare system. If you want to bring it to automotive and autonomous, well, don't just build an autonomous car, build an autonomous, think of Robomart. Robomart is pretty hyped. I know the CEO, and his play is, he has to build the full stack of autonomous, but at the same time, he's also getting calls for PoCs from multinationals that actually give him business. They want to roll out programs. So he actually has customers while he's building his autonomous vehicle. And one suggestion is in China to bring healthy food, custom made, not groceries, but healthy organic food right to the doorstep. That would be like one opportunity that an international company could potentially work on in China. Agriculture tech, of course, in Asia, in Thailand, for instance, is interesting. And then Japan, big market, 120 million people. Go there from a corporate side, to actually find deep tech startups. What else is needed? People are moving back in the city. Urban solutions, smarter city solutions. And I spoke with a Japanese person yesterday, and also even from Europe, technologies that could help Japanese corporations on the autonomous and the automotive industry. Even they have a strong automotive industry, a lot of deep tech research themselves, but there are opportunities. I want to make this interactive. What are the opportunities? We had just heard about India. Let's say outside China. China is a tough market to crack. What are the opportunities in, let's say, Thailand, Malaysia? Anybody? Anybody from Malaysia here? Anybody Thailand? Where are you guys from? All from Germany, all from Berlin? Anybody from the Philippines here? Everybody's from India. Okay. Then we just talked about India. I don't have to go back to that. Then we'll just go to the next slide. Construction tech. We did a big project for one of the largest German construction companies last year in Asia and saw Series A deal flow from Israel all the way to the Pacific border, if you will. And I can tell you construction tech, prop tech, we had a tour yesterday, a VC tour, is definitely, obviously, there's a lot of building going on and it needs to be automated, and data. Data is king, right? In the construction industry, whoever will actually own the data end to end will be able to move markets and predict trends and so on. So if you're in big data and construction tech, or if you have big data solutions, you can move into construction tech. Asia is definitely a place to consider. And then, of course, digitization of all these many SMEs that are in Asia, another good trend. Here's a stat from KPMG, pretty recent, what VCs are investing in Asia. Well, you see software, which is, they didn't break it down, the easiest to invest in as a VC because the costs are in some ways a lot less than with hardware startups. So we're almost through here. What's that? Anybody? Exactly, that's a Chinese term. If you haven't heard, you guys in India work really hard as well. This means you work from 9 a.m. till 9 p.m. 6 days a week. And that's a term that's been coined in China and sort of gotten a little social media slash back on WeChat, that actually the startups are really kicking butt and are working really hard. So if we look at the corporates, you should understand that when you deal with startups. There are such differences in the work ethics in so many ways between large multinational European corporates and Chinese startups or startups in other countries in Asia. Government, we can't stress it often enough. We built our company with APEC support, and I built our offices and our presence in China all through government relationships. It's really started that way. For corporates, for SMEs, for Mittelstand, for startups, seek out the government, look what they're doing. And then, of course, you must differentiate. I just mentioned an example earlier in the talk. When you go, startups always like to forget to look into competitors. Well, what's safe and not done in Germany doesn't mean it hasn't been done in China. And you know that, but you don't research it. Type it in Google and figure out what your competitors are before you go. And then align partner programs with the national priorities, like Singapore has a lot of schemes, right? Smart city and so on. You want to study that. China has the 2025 plan that's available on the internet, so you know what they're looking at as a corporation. So if you want to engage with startups in China, then you know what also the VCs are investing in, because the VCs every year invest in the trend of the year. One year it's artificial intelligence, the next year is something different. It changes, right? It's always the flavor of the year. And then you should look as corporations, there are not too many here anymore, but also startups, of course, for talent sourcing. The universities, like the MIT of China, Tsinghua University as an example, is a tremendous pool for talent. And most startups in China have come out of one of the two top universities. They have graduated there and they have roots and ties back into it. This is our last slide here. Maybe a little talk on our Automotive Venture Lab, and we're using that as it's a PoC program. If you want to soft land your startup, or you want to have your corporation work with Asian startups, work together on a project that doesn't require too many resources in the sense of you don't have to invest millions of dollars. Just work on, again, the use case and build a solution together. That is a wonderful way to localize And there we're going a little bit in detail what are the advantages Taiwan has for the automotive industry. A little underestimated right now, but I mentioned it on the car panel the other day. There are how many lines of code? There was a Ford GT 2 years ago, and they claimed to make it autonomous. They had 10 million lines of code. 10 million lines of code. The Boeing 78, not the one that crashed, the 737, the 787, God forbid. The 787, how many million lines of code does that have? Anybody? So the Ford GT 2 years or 3 years ago had 10 million lines of code. An airplane, 787, how many million lines of code? Anybody? Any guess? We're almost through here. Don't be shy. 1 million? It's 6 million. It's about 6 million. You know, so you guys are really smart. Most people would say 1 billion or something, because an airplane seems a lot more involved. But so Taiwan, of course, has the processing power, being the epicenter of all the computer companies, and so much is going to happen in the car. And now with the Data Privacy Act, a lot of data can't even be sent in the cloud anymore. It needs to be processed in the car. And then there's the semiconductor industry. And tremendously for the startups here that look not to outsource to Eastern Europe, but to actually soft land by hiring people that are engineers that can program for you and then help you get landed in Asia. Look at Taiwan. I'm sorry, I'm not Taiwanese, I'm German, but I love being there, and I think it's a small island, 23 million people. People make $600–700 when they come out of college. There's many, many universities, 150 universities, 10,000 AI engineers are graduating every year, and it gets you right started in China or in Greater China, and you know, it's one step in that direction. So I just wanted to share that with you. This is what we do, and these are some of the companies that we have worked with. This is my email. If you have any questions, I'm happily available. And I had a really great week here, guys. It was really, really awesome. People are so open, and I met some awesome startups and some interesting corporates, and I hope you felt the same. Thank you. Did I say
Perfect. Very good. We have also time for one question. Oh, if you, yeah.
It wasn't very collaborative.
Well, yeah.
I have one question. You seem to be a fan of the German healthcare system. In case you wanted to reform it, how would you go forward?
Reform the German healthcare system. Well, I would say study the United States. People wait till they're almost dead until they go to the emergency room, and you still wait 10 hours. People in Germany and in Taiwan, it's very similar, the health, and in Canada, just run to the doctor for every little itch, and you spend time in India, so I'm sure you're aware that people self-medicate for longer than needed. So I think there are too many resources spent. I don't really know that much about the German healthcare system. I moved away 23 years ago, but I know it's sort of socialized, and that means people run to the doctor. And I have a friend, one of our relatives, actually a doctor, and he just tells me he's a therapist. They come with all their itches and ouches, and you know, he's just telling me. It's a lot of people go to the doctor here, especially the older generation. They're lonely, and they want to talk to the doctor. They have a friend in the doctor, and that should not be that way. So you probably have to lower the barrier or raise the fees. But again, this is not my. I can't fix the German. Sorry.
No, just briefly, if there are any startups in the room who have ideas on healthcare and how to respond to the German Minister for Health, for example, who tries to introduce e-health, who tries to go digital with German health system, I think that would be the way forward. And also, it could do something to reduce the very costly German system. Only to correct this, because you have been away from Germany for a long time.
But if you exchange knowledge, then you see more questions. Then you find a solution. Yes. Oh, please stand up.
Oh. Hi. My name is Bridget. So I have a question. So if I'm a startup from a German startup company, and I want to move to Asia to start up a company in Asia, which is the country in your eyes is easier to venture into Asia?
Work for. My first question is, it's not about an easy country, it's do you have local contacts that can help you? That will be easy anywhere. Number one. Number two, is your product a fit for the market? Number three, are you willing to contribute resources and allocate resources there. But I know that's not really the answer you want to hear, but honestly, that's the real answer. It comes down to the personal level. Who do you know? And that's where you can play, if the competitive landscape allows. But the opportunities in Asia, who is opening up, who is welcoming international startups, generally speaking, I would say the last place to go is China. Because it's a big market, yes, but they're going to crush you. Unless you have, again, local Chinese trusted partners that will help you.
Volker, we have 2 more questions.
Very quickly, you mentioned a lot about automotive. I would just like to know, if some startup is looking at automotive, where are we going? Are we still talking about that autos which are going to be made on 20,000 a year, or are we saying don't go to automotive, that's going to crash with the sharing and whatever? What's your prediction?
Automotive is going to fly. We're actually working with a self-flying car in Oregon that we're sourcing the UX experience where we take the pedals out that the 787 Dreamliner still has, the foot pedals. Don't really need them. So yeah, automotive is definitely driving innovation, like NASA did with the space travel. We discussed this on the automotive panel. Great question. So automotive is definitely going forward, but the dream of the self-driving car everywhere, anytime, in 5 years, 10 years, 15 or 20 years, no. In controlled, constrained environments, yes.
One last question concerning China, because in my eyes you irritated a bit while you were talking about China and Taiwan almost simultaneously while talking about Greater China, right?
Yeah.
So Taiwan
Hong
is
Kong
such,
too.
Hong Kong, Shanghai, Taiwan. I think there's a huge difference in approaching Taiwan as a country and China. I mean, this is depending on what kind of strategy you send out. I mean, there's huge problems in China as such, but you gotta bend in there and you gotta fit in with the government regulations. Taiwan as such, I think the whole economic situation is a bit more liberal than it is in China. Isn't that the case?
Oh, yeah, I've spent 10 years in Taiwan. I love Taiwan, of course. And I love China. I've been to China. Shanghai is a great city, but totally different, right? You have a huge market of 1.3 billion people on the mainland, and in Taiwan, 23 million. But you can localize your product. They speak Chinese, they speak the same language, there are similar consumer patterns, and then you can hop across the ocean if you want to. But to actually go to Taiwan to build a company there, no, unless you source hardware, for instance. You know, use the resources, use as a platform.
One last question.
You can take it.
Yeah, okay, but good point. And he made it clear now, you're satisfied with the answer, or because you are not, and then I cannot conclude the panel because then you're unhappy.
I'll catch you later, because I studied in Taiwan last year, and then I think they're very open for innovation, and they're also very keen to, or eagerly keen to get financial power from out of the country, just because of the One China policy, for example, just to get back on the map and all these kind of reasons. But I think that is way too much for just
like us. There is a German, now actively we're looking for a German startup that wants to work with us to apply for an R&D grant for several €100,000 for automotive that is available. It's a bilateral program, Germany-Taiwan, just very dedicated. So if anybody wants to hop over to Asia that way, you're of automotive solutions, let me know. Yes.
Okay, give it up for Volker, ladies and gentlemen.